Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined as always by Justin Perri at Justin Perri, 8-shot quality data analyst, also a part of Hoops HQ. Remember to check out TheLines.com for the best college basketball odds. Justin, we've been off for a week, and we got a loaded Friday and Saturday slate, tipping it off with the Big Ten battle for first place, number 12 Michigan against number 14 Michigan State. The Wolverines had lost 8 straight games against the spread before covering as short road underdogs against Ohio State. The Buckeyes getting blitzed by a pretty bad Northwestern team on Thursday night. But I digress. Michigan's still riding a 5-game winning streak straight up here. Michigan State coming off of that victory over Purdue, handing the Boilermakers their third straight loss. So we were texting a little bit before the show started. I have a write-up on this game over at thelines.com. We're aligned thought process-wise. I haven't played a part of the total yet, but share it with the listeners and viewers. What's your handicap for this massive Big Ten tilt?
Yeah, I wrote it up for Hoops HQ actually on this one for Friday's marquee matchup, I'd say. I mean, this is going to be a great game. I'm on the over, which has been a little up and down. It opened, I think, 149.5 was like the first thing you were able to touch. Got to 151, 152.5 very quickly. Kind of stayed there most of yesterday, and then kind of came back down this morning. Some action so you can get back in at 150, 150.5, depending where you play. I still like it, even, with maybe some market movement against. Even with like the identity of the Spartans being very defensive, I think both teams are actually overperforming defensively. And there is going to be few teams more primed to score off of the many opportunities the turnovers from Wolf and Golden are going to provide to Tom Izzo and co. This is, bottom 50 turnover rate, just undermines the half court for them, and then the defense for Michigan State should be able to just fuel that transition game. Over 150 feels good. It's a little antithetical, but I do think it's the right way to look at it when you have a low number like 150 for the offensive talent on the floor.
Yeah, I'm with you. I haven't played it. I doubt I will, just because totals have been so inflated. And to your point, maybe this is a little bit deflated just because the number has ticked down after the market initially steamed it up. But both offenses have a pretty good advantage with the pick and roll attack. You mentioned Wolf and Vlad Golden, despite the turnover issues. And then if Michigan State can turn Michigan over, transition defense has been a struggle for Michigan. And again, back to Wolf and Golden, Michigan State's ball screen coverage was a problem against Indiana. Ballo and Renew, going back to that loss for MSU at home last week, combined for 33 points. You would think Wolf and Golden can do the same thing again, and their drop coverage, especially with Golden, sets up Michigan State to have a field day in the mid-range. Now, maybe both of these teams come out a little bit tight. That would be my one concern. You get a slugfest at Michigan, and we've yet to mention the spread for this game. Wolverines -2.5, -3. This line was as high as Michigan -3.5. With the home court advantage in mind, maybe a little bit inflated towards Michigan, but I don't have a play on the side. I would agree with you. If I'm going to play anything, it would be the over.
Yeah, I mean, look, Michigan State expected to have opponents be shooting 6% better from behind the three-point line in conference, and Michigan 4% better from behind the three-point line in conference alone. So this isn't just, one side. I think both sides have been looking really good on their defensive prowess, both at the rim, from mid-range. There isn't really much that's been pointing towards things getting more defensive. That's the thing. I think you're getting probably a local maximum in terms of the expected defensive abilities for these teams. I don't know that they are going to be able to limit each other. They also are very good offenses on the other side. And I think, maybe some of the better offenses in the conference, where if you think that they've developed this defensive prowess from playing maybe some of the weaker offenses in the Big Ten, which, there are a few, Washington, Penn State, USC, Minnesota, Indiana, Rutgers come to mind are the lower ones here. Maybe less USC, probably maybe more Northwestern now, especially UCLA's offense has been pretty putrid. But, I think this is an interesting spot because Michigan is probably one of the better offenses in the conference. I would say, currently, yeah, they're up there. But again, both teams been pretty defensive, pretty balanced. When that strong offense comes in, I think that could win out here in Big Ten play against maybe some people's predispositions.
It's so interesting looking at Michigan big picture because, like I mentioned, they're winning games, and you could argue maybe they've struggled to stabilize their double-digit leads at times. You go back to the Oregon game a couple weeks ago. I know you were on the Ducks, and Oregon comes back in the second half, or the latter part of the second half, winds up covering 1-8 ATS in their last 9. When does the bottom start to fall out, though, for Michigan getting these marginal victories despite the lack of ATS success? I know neither of us are on a side for this game, but
that's a good question.
Yeah, long term, see, this is the spot where I don't think it's worth fading Michigan at home. If this was in East Lansing, maybe you take a look at Sparty. But come the NCAA tournament, like I touched on a couple weeks ago, that's where I think you could get maybe an inflated number on the Wolverines. Obviously, on a neutral court, no home court advantage, where you take a look at, once again, going against Dusty May and this pick and roll offense that is vulnerable in drop coverage and does turn the ball over at a bottom 30 rate nationally.
Right. I mean, it is a recipe for disaster when you have everything on the line and you know what, you're going to turn the ball over. It's very likely. But they have strung together 6 wins in a row. You're right. And I think shot quality does give us a really unique ability to look at these games and confirm whether everything kind of happened in accordance with expectation or not. I expect it to be a very close win against Ohio State. So, yeah, you take a 58 to 60% win chance there. And probably that's a good chunk of luck, not getting unlucky, not doing something silly, winning by one possession is not something that is super, I guess, repeatable. And especially when expected to win by one possession as well. They've done that a couple times, though. The Purdue 2-point win was expected to be a 6-point win. So you could almost look at that as them not getting their ideal result. It should have been maybe a little bit better. Walk away with that win maybe 2/3 of the time. Indiana, a 1-point win. Again, maybe even 3/4 of the time. So those wins, even though they looked really close, Eli, maybe we should give them a bit more credit for them and not say, well, they were a bit suspect. If anything, they got maybe a little unlucky to land that close. Oregon, pretty fair. Again, though, expected to be 7 was 4. Rutgers was the lucky one. Rutgers, they were expected to lose. Ace Bailey was absolutely ice cold at home. Michigan stole that one by 3 points, expected to be a 9-point loss. So there's your unlucky thing, your unlucky event. Penn State at home, 4-point game, expected to be a massive win by 17. So it actually has maybe been a little bit more reinforcing. I think this is probably means that what you're getting out of the models, which are giving them victory points and, beating good teams, raise you up in models like KenPom, et cetera, probably pretty fair to what's going on here. And I do think we're going to get a good game between Michigan State and Michigan. Not really anything I want to touch on the spread. Maybe just an alternate same game parlay plus 9.5 on each side.
Yeah, and then maybe get a little bit more margin on the total if you want to maybe take a deflated total even more than the market has deflated it in the last few hours or so, looking at the betting odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And speaking of FanDuel Sportsbook, Justin, we have openers for Saturday's games, the massive portion of this podcast being dedicated to Saturday's college basketball slate, and a big one in the SEC. Tennessee at Texas A&M. KenPom has this one, Vols -1. The market, or at least FanDuel, on the open, Tennessee -2.5. So Volunteers have had a week off since the win over Vanderbilt, failing to cover, but winning that game by 4 against their in-state rivals. And they've won 3 of their last 4 games. Texas A&M falling apart against your Mississippi State Bulldogs in the second half. Unsurprisingly, we're going oppo here, Justin.
Oh boy.
I'm going to be on the Aggies trade. You're going to be once again fading the Aggies trade. So what say you before I have my rebuttal?
Did you not see enough against Michigan, against Mississippi State? That's my question, I guess. I thought that was maybe a little bit of an overcompensation, but that what we saw is exactly the concern with like why I've come up here every time saying that they are a team that has likely been overvalued. They can lose. Again, moving on the road though is interesting, and I don't know if we're going to be oppo because I don't know if I can take that at -2.5 for Tennessee. Tell you the truth, because I would hope that the Ken Palm number of -1 gets met with like a pick 'em at home. You're getting the market being like, all right, we saw enough. This is the shot quality pointing at it for a while. I think you're foolish to think shot quality. I'm not talking to you directly, Eli, but anyone in general to think that shot quality hasn't like permeated. We see this all the time. These weird movements of like, wait, why did this one team have like the market moved for them on the road and everyone's moving at home? Well, guess what? Big shot quality edge. It is really been an impressive season for our data, the command over the market. I have all the points that back it up, so it's not like I'm talking out of my butt. Every time it feels like things are moving weirdly. Again, SQ is going to be on Tennessee. SQ would tell you to take the Ken Palm number at Tennessee -1. And I would probably go as far that 2.5 might still be within range. If you're losing at home, one possession, you're probably blowing that thing up to 2-3 possessions, and the chance of hitting that 3, pushing it to overtime, trying to get the win. The loss doesn't matter if you lose by 2 or 5. They're going to foul and try to give themselves any chance to get the ball back in their hands to cut the deficit down. Maybe they do make that 3-pointer last ditch down 5 and it's 2 and I lose the -2.5. But yeah, very strong lean against Texas A&M. Just had some problems with, expecting them to be as good as they have been, right? They are not good 3-point shooters. They do not defend the rim well on defense. They do not run an efficient transition attack. They crash the glass on offense, which is great. They get to the free throw line. They force the turnovers, but there's just a little extra missing. And then, our expected metrics in the conference at the rim are just so different, expecting them to give up a 63% field goal percentage when opponents get to the rim, only giving up a 53%. We saw a very rim-focused team take advantage of that. Tennessee can do whatever they want. I don't know. If they want to turn into a rim attack team, they will. If they want to use that gravity once they're panicking and find, Zakai and Lanier open for 3 and drop daggers from deep, they will. This is a very complete team, and if Tennessee wants to continue to solidify what seed line they're on, I think a big road win is important. But I don't handicap a narrative. The data says A&M is worse than they look, so probably value going against them, especially for the price.
Okay.
There's my spiel. There you go. Go ahead.
Listen. Fair points about shot quality, and I am surprised about this line being Tennessee -2.5 on open. Yeah. It's going to come the other way, so maybe you do get your pick 'em. So. Maybe at most books this opens Tennessee -1.
Well, tell everyone to play A&M here, so that in a couple hours I can take the other side.
We'll see, but. Tennessee's turnover problems, you mentioned A&M could turn you over. Zakai Ziegler, career high 21.9% turnover rate. That could be an issue for an A&M team that, yes, to your point, is inefficient in transition, but they do want to play up tempo. Also inefficient from 3, but I do think they're due for a little bit of home cooking from behind the arc. And also, you look at Tennessee in terms of generating second chance opportunities like A&M. Aggies have the best offensive rebounding rate in college basketball. Tennessee 15th in that department. But Texas A&M, number 1 in defensive rebounding percentage in SEC play. So this is a team that isn't going to allow you to create those second chance shots, while the Vols are a little bit more vulnerable on the defensive glass. Okpara, the transition to SEC play from Big Ten play, I'm not saying the Big Ten isn't physical, but I don't think he's made the leap to the SEC, best conference in college basketball by a mile, as we discussed, time over time. So I think the Aggies have the advantage on the glass at both ends of the floor. And then, like I mentioned, 3-point regression. Both teams theoretically are due for it at the defensive end, but Tennessee overall this season still allowing around a 28% clip from behind the arc. Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps to an extent, even though he's wildly inconsistent at times. Generally speaking, playing more up-tempo, you can generate more efficient or at least cleaner looks in transition, even though Texas A&M overall, open, not open, is the less efficient team from beyond the arc. At home, coming off of the Mississippi State loss, I think they bounce back here, especially at getting 2.5. I'll be on the Aggies, Justin.
Look, I get it. But look, in conference play, this is my concern. That A&M allowing 50% of shots against from behind the line. That's essentially like inviting Alabama in every time you play. And they're allowing opponents to shoot 34% from deep in conference, which is getting masked by a strong non-conference defensive run. And their season numbers at 31.8, which is 72nd. Their conference number, they're 11th worst at allowing, threes to go through the hoop. That's very concerning. And then they can't hit free throws. So they're shooting 66% from the line right now. They're getting blocked. I would have some concerns here. If they get blocked on 16% of their shots, shoot 66% from the free throw line, I think it could get a little ugly. So I think we are going to be Oppo. I think I've talked myself into it. It's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game. I think, it's going to be shooting variance. If that, maybe the crowd gets into it, if they have the students show up, if it gets to be a spot where maybe Tennessee can fall flat, I do think that's possible. It's not that it's impossible. I don't come up here and say my bets have a 100% chance to win, but that's the type of stuff we're talking about in the 30 to 40, 45% loss scenario for me, where I lose the bet, which is, okay, maybe they go cold, maybe A&M gets that, extra emphasis, and they, maybe hit some of their shots. They've been abysmal shooting. That seems to be their identity year in and year out. They don't really play that game. They play a real crash the glass game, and you're going to have a tough time. And if Tennessee can't hit that first attempt, and A&M can maybe, get out and run in transition, especially because Tennessee's the best defense in KenPom. It's not like they're going to have an easy time. So I don't know. I think the cards point a little bit towards Tennessee on this one. And it's not like they've had the most stellar season either. They've taken a home loss this year. They lost to Kentucky on the road, and I don't think that's exactly aging well. So I think they want to get this one. They definitely don't want to take a loss here, and it's supposed to be a tight game. You get a tight line. If it was, gets the 3, if it keeps moving in Tennessee, I don't think I can take it past the full possession. But maybe wait, see if the money comes back. Good luck, Eli. I mean, you shoot me a text, we can get some big free action,
A little tease. I think we're going Oppo here one more time on the show, but not for this upcoming game. Iowa State at Houston. KenPom making this one. Houston -9 initial opener. Houston -7.5, juiced in Iowa State's direction. Early thoughts on this one? Huge game in the Big 12. Houston atop the conference standings. Iowa State in 4th behind Arizona and Texas Tech. Turnover still an issue for Iowa State. I mentioned that with at least Ziegler in particular for Tennessee. But 12th in the conference in league play in turnover percentage, so that hasn't really improved even with Momcilovic back in the lineup. They're floor spacing 4. Houston, highest percentage of takeaways forced in Big 12 play. I maybe lean Houston at this number. I don't have an edge either way, though. Anything for you here?
I mean, I feel like Iowa State has been hypersensitive to road and home splits. and they just play in a strong home environment, and they play in a lot of tough road environments. This is another tough road environment. Houston's crazy. I haven't really been betting on them a lot. I have a future on them to win the title. I think like 9-1, 10-1, and I think is still available and still a great price. Great price. But this is on average, you're not going to get much. Models, I don't think, are going to really recommend betting on this at all. These are very well understood teams. Lines are going to be sharp. I don't have a bet on this. It's interesting to see how they look in conference play. The post up defense for Iowa has been a weak spot, and they're going to try to avoid allowing Houston to run it. But I do think Houston's going to use the action a lot. They're not great with it in terms of expected success, but I'm guessing their actual success is very high because they run it at over 11% of the time. Which is, as highest in the nation post-up usage. So expect a lot of that from Houston. It doesn't really play too well for what we do here at Shot Quality, but they are hyper potent off the dribble, hyper potent off the screens, hyper potent in catch and shoots. They take a lot of mid-range shots, and they're really good at them. It's just you're never going to get like a commendation from Shot Quality taking them. It's just they kind of mystify the number in that way. And they also dominate the four factors. So good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, I don't want to call Texas A&M Houston light because number one.
I think that's a really good thing to call, honestly. I think it's a really good
I think
way to
from a market standpoint, market rating standpoint, it's fair.
Right. It's just Texas A&M, the light part is we can get beat if someone can beat us at the rim. Houston has probably more answers for that and like can probably scheme around it, forces the turnovers if you have that presence inside maybe a little bit more effectively. I don't know. I mean, that was a pretty unique case with Mississippi State last week. I don't think you're going to get that type of beatdown for A&M or that type of success for Mississippi State in the future. That was just the perfect combination. I texted you before it happened. I was like, gotta have this one. This is like, or else what are we doing here? And yeah, came home real nice. So like to see that. But it's not as strong here for that team, for either team, and especially not for Houston and Iowa State. I think it's largely a skip. Maybe just the contrarian over if you want to be a pain, and everyone's going to think this goes under. Maybe it runs and guns just enough to get over that line late.
Last thing for me on it, Houston does a really good job of limiting teams in transition, not just from a points per possession standpoint, but they don't allow teams to run. First percentile in transition offense face that according to Synergy. On the surface, if you're telling me even though the KenPom line is 9, so you're not getting a ton of value from that standpoint with the market at 7.5, you're getting 3 possessions on the minimum with the Cyclones. I would say Iowa State, but I think to your point, this is just a really tough game to bet because Houston, if they're not allowing Iowa State to run, that's where the Cyclones generate their most efficient offense. Maybe the contrarian over does happen, and both teams are hyper efficient in the half court. Houston, by way of offensive rebounds and in the mid-range, and Juwan Roberts in the post, but stay away from me too.
Yep, gotta be. Just enjoy it.
Let's get back to the SEC. Missouri, -2 on KenPom. No line available yet at any legal sportsbook, but the odds are available, Justin, for Missouri to win the national championship, down to 40-1 after their double-digit win against Alabama at home earlier in the week. Right there with Texas Tech, actually, in the market. And you can check out the best national title odds over at thelines.com. You were celebrating on X, and so were Missouri fans. I had a couple buddies that go to Missouri. They were celebrating that win like they won the national title already. So ahead of this game against Arkansas, what's your long-term outlook on this Missouri team before we handicap the Saturday night matchup in the SEC?
Well, I think for me, the long-term is right where the market is now. I think that, that's where the futures market is kind of fun when you're like, okay, This Missouri team here, coming into, I think they were 51st in Ken Palm on December 31st. I believe they are like 15th or higher now. I don't even know what they are after beating Alabama. I should know. I should
13th.
read Ken Palm. Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. They were legitimately 50th on when they played Alabama State. They were 52nd on after they played Auburn. They were 53rd going into the game against LSU. They won by a bunch, and then they beat Vandy, beat Florida, beat Arkansas, lose to Texas on the road, fine. Only drop a few points there. Beat Mississippi State. Those two put them right outside the top 20, and then Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama wins, and 13th. Man, again, so the thing is that they lost that Illinois game. They were kind of being slept on a little bit. I believe Shot Quality had that as a win. A couple of their games were kind of low scoring. Yeah, so the Illinois game was a loss, expected to be a 5-point win on neutral. They were not expected to take any losses in the non-con, expected to have a lot of their games be bigger blowouts. All the signs underneath were pointing to them being one of the like a top 20, top 25 team in shot quality, and yet they were priced at 120 to 1 around like the middle of January. So I think I bought in after before the Florida win, essentially. So right after the Vandy win, because I was high on Vandy already, and so they beat Vandy pretty good at home, good shot quality win. And so before the Florida game, got 120 to 1, 3/4 unit on it, which was pretty big for me when I'm betting futures. So I think that's to win 90 units or something. Whew. That'd be fun. That'd be really fun. That's to win it all though. So like again, I wasn't really super refined in my futures process for the year yet, and I was kind of just locking things in off the board that I liked, and I probably should have picked up Final Four. I'll probably lose some value hedging it out because I don't think they're winning it. I don't think they're winning it. That's just the truth of the matter. So, I'm fine losing a bit of that value to the VIG when I have to play against them, in a couple rounds. I would assume I let them play the first round out, no hedge, depending who the second round matchup is, maybe slightly hedging something if it's like the perfect type of antithetical matchup for them. But, ideally letting them try to get to that Final Four spot or fade or going against them in the last game in the Elite Eight, ideally, or in the Sweet 16 before you start taking swings against, because I have a wide futures portfolio. So it's not like I only have that. And I think, your play style changes a lot when you bet 20 teams versus 2.
Absolutely.
Right. So like I'm hoping that I'm going to lose my Missouri future, if at all, to someone else I have. Right. Because I also have Wisconsin 120 to 1. I also have like a Vandy 80 to 1 to make the Final Four. I have New Mexico 80 to 1 to make the Final Four. So I'm hoping that my paths are colliding so I can just be like, all right, maybe a light hedge to give myself like maybe a no loss scenario. And you go from there. So we'll see. But I do think that they are properly priced now. Of course, there's not like a no I could hedge out with right now and like cut my losses. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I'm going to have like 40 tickets on my desk sitting here in March trying to, get the right one home. But Missouri was looking good. I think there's a few more. I try to add a few every week. So I'll have a new article out, I think actually later tonight, on a few additions for Final Four. I have my candidates selected, maybe a few that took bad losses people are sleeping on right now, I think is kind of what you want to look for, because you're not really beating anyone to who's the hot team in the last couple of weeks. If anything, you want to be like, who's the good team that lost some tough luck games that you can get for a better price right now, that might pick it up and get rolling in 3 weeks.
Yeah, that last point is really important when you're gauging futures, especially right before March Madness. You don't want to buy high.
No.
You want to buy low. A team like Alabama,
you can snipe hot. You can like pick off a book that's slow. Like I got like a 60 to 1 on Wisconsin to win it all off Caesars the other morning because they were just slow to update from the last day, and Wisconsin got that big win and everyone else was at 30 to 1 already, or 28 to 1, 23 to 1. And you can do if like, okay, well, let me see if like someone's still hanging a bad line, which I mean, fair sport, all's fair. Which I
One way,
scour like
unless they reject your bet and then adjust the number.
They usually don't. I gotta hand it to most regulated books. They're pretty good about it. Especially when you're not betting thousands. I mean, I'm betting like scale of hundreds for my futures. So like I don't incur too much. I'm not pushing past limits, and they happily take your money on futures. Usually, unless you're crushing them. It's they like to have your money for a month. So
right. I will say keyword most books.
Oh, most. Again, I try to keep it to the big ones, and it's not like 60 to 30s that. Like, whoa, man, you'd absolutely crush. It's still a 30 to 1 feature, and I would be shocked if Wisconsin wins it all. So hopefully I can hedge my position, though, and use exchanges, and I'll be in Vegas and in New Jersey. So a lot of options.
At least you're a realist. I appreciate that.
I try to keep it as real as possible. I think I'm like mid to high level gambler. I wouldn't consider myself professional yet. I'd love to scale that far and have it pay my rent eventually. I think mathematically I can get there, but
no, but I don't even mean from that standpoint. I was more so talking futures because when you get a great number, like I touched on, Missouri social media, especially X, blowing up after that win over Alabama. Wow, you have a really good number on the Tigers. It's not like you're going out on this podcast saying Missouri 90 to 1 is not I think you would be an idiot to say a lock, but I also think you would be dumb to say good chance to win the title, and you're realistic about it.
I mean, I think I've already kind of won the gamble in my effect, right? Like even I hope that they go in with a 30 to 1 and I have a bunch of tickets that I paid 100 to 1 that I have 30 to 1 and that just play at that level. I just hope that's all. I'm just hoping I'm right and that this Missouri is capable of beating. If they can beat Alabama at home, they should be able to beat, 75% of the field on a neutral. That's the hope. So, that gamble means that they're getting into the third round, and I'm holding a 120 to 1 on a team in the third round that is probably at that point, 10 to 1, 15 to 1 to win it all. And and maybe even favored to win their third round game. And I can get out at, a plus 150 for 15 to 20 units. And if they lose, I'm happy. If they win, I'm still holding like, an effective 80 to 1. So it's not exactly science, but it's fun. And I think if you have history of winning with futures, which I have, I think, I'm still up on my futures from I had like 2 futures 3 years ago, the Villanova year with the Achilles injury to Justin, whatever his last name was. Justin Moore, right. I had Kansas Villanova as my 2 futures and they met in the Final Four. So I took Kansas 14 to 1 into the final. And did very well with that. So
don't bring that game up, that national title game. I had UNC against the spread, so that was fine. Thank you, DeJuan Harris, for stepping out of bounds. But I had a long shot bet on Armando Bacot to win MOP of the Final Four. And if he didn't step on the floorboard, UNC, for one, up 16 or double digits at half.
What a game.
Yeah, he and UNC collapsed in the second half. But, Justin, before we get too far into the futures conversation, I know the YouTubers out there could get a little antsy when we're breaking down individual games. So, going back to Missouri and this matchup Saturday night in Fayetteville at Arkansas, Woo Pig Suey, that chant's going to be going crazy with Arkansas right on the bubble, sold out arena, and Arkansas coming off back-to-back losses at Texas A&M, the aforementioned Aggies last Saturday, but covering or at least pushing on the close, and then losing but covering at Auburn. That was a really impressive effort, especially with Big Z for Arkansas going 0 of 8 from deep. You look at this matchup, and by the way, going back to that Auburn game, one last thing, Arkansas up with about 3 minutes to go, but really struggling to score, and that can happen against Auburn and the number 1 team in college basketball. maybe a little bit suspect heading into March. Conversation for either later in the show or another day. But I think Arkansas has a pretty good matchup here. Missouri, despite their offensive prowess, especially going back to that Alabama matchup on Wednesday night, 47th in adjusted defensive efficiency nationally per KenPom. Arkansas, conversely, 6th in adjusted D over the last month, and very, very good with their transition defense, which is big against Missouri's up-tempo offense, especially Caleb Grill, who is borderline elite when you look at his transition efficiency numbers, whether it's from behind the arc or attacking the rim. And to that point, the Hogs' rim defense of late and overall this season, led by Big Z and Thiero, borderline, I think 80th percentile, 85th percentile, and they're really, really good in their ball screen defense, which is big against a Mizzou offense that in the half court is pretty reliant on their ball screen action. Looking also, if you go back to the first matchup, Arkansas lost that game by double digits. They were a different team at the time with Boogie Flan in the lineup, out for the season. John L. Davis has really found his confidence and also seemingly healthier at this point. So number dependent here with KenPom sitting at Mizzou -2, but pretty strong lean for me with Arkansas at home against the spread.
Yeah, no, I think I'm fully on board. It's the SEC and it's a home game. It's just, is it that easy? Maybe. It's not exactly.
Not if you're Texas A&M.
Sure, not if Texas A&M, but home win percentage is at 58.7%, which is pretty good. Pretty good. And again, I do think that this is a spot where you could see Missouri maybe, I wouldn't say regress. They've been doing great. All their games have looked solid. The Oklahoma game was expected to be much closer. But the away win at Georgia, I'm not super impressed with that Georgia side this season. I mean, man, this Missouri team is kind of tough to bet against. Expected to win on the road against Tennessee, man. I think that's how good they are. Beat Mississippi State, expected to lose on the road there, so they can muscle out wins too, like they do. I think in general, you do, unless you have a real reason to say like this is a perfect spot for where Missouri's can pick them apart. They are fully like one of the most effective teams in the nation because they force the turnovers. They don't turn it over themselves, so they win the possession battle. They shoot really well from deep. They defend the rim really well, and then they get to the line on offense. So really, really tough for anyone. But I do think Arkansas in general is going to be able to stuff them a little bit in the mid-range inside. The concern is, and I mean, I've seen Arkansas play this year, Eli. I watched them against Michigan at Madison Square Garden for the Jimmy V Classic. They cannot close out. It is such a problem. It is such a problem. Those closeouts, they give their opponent shooters so much space. So
especially when Adu is on the floor.
Right. It gets bad. And so shot quality rates them 301st in defense against three-point shooting, essentially saying they allow high-quality threes. And then, it's both the dribble, off the dribble, and the catch and shoot. So it's not like, they're just firing out the catch and shoots and they're getting a lot of space. No, they get beat off the dribble too. And they allow plenty of shots from deep. Luckily they do force a good amount of isolation by keeping opponents away from the rim a fair amount. But it's still the SEC, so you're still getting 40% of shots in the rim. You're talking about differentials of 4 to 5% between teams, separating the entire pack. In terms of like luck, they have definitely been overperforming defensively and underperforming offensively. So a little bit of a tough sell for me on Arkansas. I think I probably will lean against them just because Missouri has been that great. But again, I see both sides of the argument. I won't have a bet on this one. I'm assuming that, everything's modeled pretty well with these teams. It's very hard for me to find a play in the SEC at this time of the year. I mean, my play volume, when we first started doing the show in December, Eli, I was probably hitting 30 to 35% of the slate in terms of spreads alone. Now I'm, struggling to get past 22.5 because again, it's just everything's kind of caught up. The edge that we have in our shot quality data that I'm able to find early in the season, it dries up because teams perform as we expect, and Ken Palm catches up. So the lines essentially catch up. So once everything kind of plays out as I think it's going to, and we're correct and we win bets, long term, that means that, the market's going to catch on over time. So it gets a little bit slimmer, and it's a tough spot. The market understands these teams well, and there's nothing wrong with your data pointing to that, because it should be the most common result.
And that's the thing with Arkansas here. Covering despite losing at Auburn. Covering, or at least pushing, against Texas A&M last weekend. Covering against LSU. Covering against Alabama despite losing at home. And then covering at Texas, covering at Kentucky, losing outright at home to Oklahoma. They still, Hogs weren't right, at least to this extent, yet at that point. And then beating Georgia with a dominant second half effort. And that's when this run really started to get kicking into high gear. So the market is going to seemingly be fully adjusted by this point, especially with the way Arkansas looked. Maybe you could argue letdown spot for Auburn at home after they go to Tuscaloosa in the first 1-2 matchup ever in the SEC, win that game pretty much wire to wire. If you got a wire-to-wire odds on the Tigers, payout was pretty good, I'm sure, last weekend, especially with Auburn closing as an underdog. But I'm with you. That's why I closed out my handicap with number dependent here. If it's 1.5, even though that may not seem like a massive difference from 2.5, just in terms of models and numbers, maybe a stay away for me.
Yeah, I think likely not going to have a wager down if I had to guess. If it opens anything crazy, yeah, potentially. But I can see both sides. So if it's that far off Ken Palm in either direction, 2 to 3 points, you probably have reason to take both, because, assume the Ken Palm number is probably pretty good.
Last game in the SEC we're going to discuss, and this was paying off the tease from earlier. Ole Miss at Vanderbilt. Ken Palm sitting at Ole Miss -2. I don't think it opens anywhere close, and if it does, I would expect money to come in on Vandy in a must-win home spot. I know shot quality certainly favors the Commodores overall, and in this spot, I know you'll get to that in a second, but my handicap on this game with Ole Miss, coming off of that really just disjointed effort against Mississippi State at home last Saturday. The effort was flat out garbage in that one. Yeah. Shot quality be damned. And actually, shot quality had that one as a slight Ole Miss win. So underperforming kind of correlates.
That's kind of, that checks out.
Yeah, it does. And Chris Beard being a Bob Knight disciple, you know what happened this entire week. And that isn't any sort of a narrative. They had a whole week to prep for this game. So I would expect Ole Miss to come completely zoned in. I've touched on it on previous podcasts here with you, Justin. I'm pretty high on this Rebels team long term. I had a preseason future on Ole Miss. I added to that Final Four futures-wise going back to a couple weeks ago. So despite it being a must-win spot for Vandy, you could argue this is a must-win, get-right game for Ole Miss after that terrible effort against Mississippi State, in-state rival, already losing to the Bulldogs earlier in the season. Shot quality has Vandy due for some defensive three-point regression in a positive sense. But Ole Miss, this is where I kind of wonder if water is going to meet its level here for Vanderbilt defensively. Ole Miss shot just 25% from deep against Mississippi State. Pretty clean looks, which is why, to a certain extent, Mississippi State maybe shouldn't have won that game according to shot quality. Matthew Morrell also getting another week to rest up that knee. That's been an underlying issue for Ole Miss. He hasn't been healthy of late. So not only Chris Beard really getting into his guys, but maybe Morrell resting up should pay dividends here for Ole Miss, especially with his shooting from behind the arc. And Ole Miss, if you look at their full body of work, has struggled with teams that dominate the glass. Hello, Mississippi State last week. That isn't really a concern against Vanderbilt. And last thing for me here, Ole Miss's no middle defense is going to be key against a Vanderbilt team that if they don't shoot well from behind the arc, which was an issue, has been an issue pretty much throughout SEC play, especially against Kentucky during the middle of the week, getting blown out at Kentucky, and no Lamont Butler or Jackson Robinson in that game for the Wildcats. But when Vandy isn't reliant on their three-point shooting, and if they don't come out guns a-blazing here in a must-win spot from behind the arc, McLaughlin and Carey, big inside. Ole Miss, they're no middle defense. They don't tend to allow paint touches. So I really like Ole Miss here, despite it being a must-win game for Vanderbilt. You could argue must-win for Ole Miss with a week prep off of that Mississippi State loss. So I'll be on the Rebels here. I'm going to wait, though, just like you're probably going to wait on Tennessee. I'm going to wait to get a better number on Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's going to be tough because, that game for Vanderbilt against Kentucky, where they lost by 21, was a shot quality win. Vandy shot 20% from deep, I believe, and, was expected to score 10 points more than just on those threes. And then on top of that, Kentucky shot, I believe, 15 of 19 at the rim, didn't miss a free throw, and shot 6 of 9 from mid-range. So that was all like top 3 performance level for them this season. So they caught the worst luck possible. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Shot quality is going to absolutely look at it as though things went according to expectations and not that worst luck. So Vanderbilt still exists as the second best defense in all of shot quality. And we have them rated in the top 20 because of it. There's going to be a lot of reason to take Vandy here. They have had, a loss to Auburn at home by 16, shot quality expected just 2. They beat Texas. Their other home game before that, they lost to Kentucky by 1, expected to be a win. Before that, lost to Tennessee by 1, expected to be a loss. Beat South Carolina. And then Mississippi State, they lost by 20, but expected to be a win. So they've had some trouble. They definitely can look bad. So if it doesn't go well, it'll definitely, I think, for Ole Miss, maybe could blow them out at home. Like, I think it's like they're so polar. Like, Vandy's so polarized. They're either going to win this game, and they'll probably win it in a close type of battle, or they'll lose in a close type of battle. That is like most of it. But I think of that group, of that cluster of results scenarios, that Vandy's favored in the close game. But there is a large looming beast where Vanderbilt just can't hit anything. Their opponents can't seem to miss against them. They play terrible defense, and they get beat by 15 at home. And maybe that's what happens. There's probably a 10, 20% that happens. And then maybe there's like a 20 to 30% chance they lose the close game and a 50% chance they win the close game, So it's going to be tough. The Ole Miss guys are going to have to hit some tough shots. That's what Vanderbilt does. They definitely take away, some of the good looks. They defend the rim and the three-pointer really well, even in the conference. They limit spacing, which is tough to do in the SEC, and they win the turnover battle. And they actually rebound pretty well on defense too. So it'll be interesting. I do tend to lean Vandy on principle. Shot quality thinks this probably would be like a 3-point spread in Vandy's favor. I'm guessing that is not what it is coming out at currently. I think I see it as expected to be a +2 at home, maybe get that +1 if it opens up. But yeah, maybe hard to find a 3 to 4 point edge from shot quality in the SEC. We have strong feelings on Vandy. Likely a play tomorrow for me.
Okay, so going oppo there in 2 SEC games, and I know you mentioned the spacing for Vanderbilt, but I will say, according to shot quality,
what they allow, not their spacing, like their
right,
what they right.
Defensive spacing, but you look at open 3-point attempt rate, 5th worst in the conference. So Ole Miss maybe selectively can get their fair share of clean looks from behind the arc. And if they're knocking those down after missing their fair share of them against Mississippi State, like you said, this is a Vanderbilt team at times that can get lethargic offensively, and you look at scoring droughts across college basketball, this per Evan Mia. Vandy, 15th most scoring droughts of 4+ minutes this season. So there is that 15 to 20% outcome where Ole Miss is
It's
winning this
bad.
game by double digits.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with you. It's it's funny. I mean, not every distribution is just like a perfect bell curve, right? It
Yeah.
can be bumpy. It can be very bumpy. There's probably very little chance that this thing is like a 2 to 3 possession loss for Vanderbilt. It's going to be 4 to 5 possessions, or they're going to be in it the whole way. Like that's just them. And maybe I'll maybe it'll be 9, and we'll have to come up here and say how stupid I am. But look, last night I called a game landing on exactly 6 points when the live line was 5.5. So take that. No, I think Vandy's, yeah, interesting team, a bit of a tough one to love, but I like them a lot when they get out of the SEC because they are a fully like SEC gauntlet trained team that if they can avoid their peers for a couple rounds will be a real threat to make the Sweet 16. You don't pull off these type of losses in this conference and look this good on shot quality for no reason. They can finish at the rim for sure. And the minute they're not playing other SEC competition, I think their defense will look even a million times better. So it'll be interesting team. These games don't necessarily matter too much. I think they're going to make the dance
We'll
with the
see.
quality. But I would be shocked. I'd be shocked if they missed the dance, Eli. I don't know where everyone has them, but I would be pretty surprised. What's the Torvik bubble wins above bubble for Vandy? I think it's yeah, they're plus 1.4. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I don't think you take big losses losing to teams in the SEC in your WAP. So I'd be shocked. 39th best in the nation in wins above bubble. So pretty good.
Plus money to miss the dance, so the market agrees with you. FanDuel has those odds up for a select amount of teams.
What's the line?
I think it's minus 200 to make, plus 150 to miss. But
Let's
this schedule,
go.
man,
Oh yeah.
for Vanderbilt is tough. You got Ole Miss here, Texas A&M, Mizzou, Arkansas, and Georgia. Yes, the Bulldogs cost me last Saturday. Yes, they've been pathetic of late, but that game on the road in the regular season finale before the SEC tournament. But before we wrap it up here, Justin, we have a couple really good games still to get to. Number 3, Duke against Illinois at Madison Square Garden. KenPom making this line Duke -9. The betting odds have it at Duke -10.5. And I would assume that wiggle room is a byproduct of we don't know if Illinois is healthy for this game. You mentioned the Wisconsin blowout win earlier in the week, or at least hinted at it. Illinois had a myriad of sicknesses. I don't know if it's the norovirus or what, but Avicic, Big Z's brother, I think his twin brother on Illinois, dealing with a flu bug, ended up playing. Jake Davis didn't play throughout the second half. Morez Johnson, not a flu bug, but out with a wrist injury. Who knows if he comes back for the NCAA tournament or not. Yakachonis had 7 turnovers, 14 overall in his last 3 games. Maybe he's bitten by the flu bug a little bit too, or maybe that's just a byproduct of teams adjusting and playing a little bit tighter around the perimeter or just on ball in general. So Illinois dropping 2 straight games, 7 of its last 12. For Duke, red hot in ACC play despite the Clemson loss, but losing Malik Brown for at least a few weeks with a shoulder injury. And we saw Duke's defense, even though Virginia spotty offensively in the second half and overall in that game. Maluach, as good as he is as a rim protector, a bit vulnerable in drop coverage. So no Brown. Maybe Illinois could take advantage if you think this is the bottom point in the market for the Illini coming off back-to-back losses. I'm probably going to stay away unless we get positive injury reports or flu reports for Illinois. But anything for you on this game?
Yeah, this is another one that I wrote up, a little long form, which is something I'm honestly so hyped to do. I'm in the shirt today. Hoops HQ stuff has been great because, it's like reins off, right, as much as you want, like go into as much detail as you want about these games, approach it however you want, which I think is a little bit sometimes missing. A lot of people give out picks, but I also want to flex the know-how, the data, all that stuff that kind of goes into it, and just, provide some, I think, entertaining writing. But anyway, the pick I took was the over Going to grab 152.5 officially, it looks like. I think it just has to do with the way these teams are designed. It's going to work really well. Illinois, even with the injuries, is going to take their healthy diet of threes. And I think that they might make a few. They have enough of a defensive physicality that they could also push Duke into taking some threes. And I think that there's going to be some testing of Cooper Flag. I think they're going to get to the rim more than people might expect. Madison Square Garden makes for a great environment. It's going to be loud. I think both teams will play some good ball. Usually teams that can shoot at Madison Square Garden. It's not exactly like the worst sight lines, and you should always take an under. Sometimes there's like weird rims and stuff like that, but the sight lines are usually good. It's going to be packed. This is what everyone kind of lives for. So I expect everyone to show out. It's one of those games. I wouldn't, you want to take like one of those side angles. I wouldn't be totally shocked if in a non-conference game that has little bearing on teams making it into the tournament, if defense is a little bit by the wayside. Like it's just, why are we taking charges and playing hard defense? And like, come on. It's not an ACC game. They have the ACC won. Yes, Duke should win pretty handedly. I think, just skew your distribution a little bit higher on the chance that this is an open gym feeling type of environment where everyone's showing out. The scouts are out. The tickets are expensive. The families are there. The friends are there. The biggest games, the biggest crowd, the arena, that place is just, if you've never been, the most special things about it are that the great seats from almost everywhere. And the way that the acoustics are in that place is just amazing. It's one of the best sounding sporting environments anywhere. It just feels like the crowd is on top of you. So I don't know. I think the exhibition factor has to be in everyone's mind. There's very few chances for that in college basketball, but a lot of them exist in late February when teams are like, let's not get hurt, let's pack it in. Sometimes teams just quit on games and they lose by 30 because they're, who knows what's going on. Teams, half the guys are already just waiting for the portal to open. It's a very interesting environment now in college basketball, and you definitely want to consider every angle. Not getting hurt, not playing defense, having some fun, showing off, all those things. I mean, non-conference in February. I think that you got to weigh it.
If Avicic is healthy, that's where Illinois could take advantage and hit some threes, as you touched on. Yeah. If he's healthy, that's the key for Illinois right now. But last game we want to touch on, big one in the WCC, St. Mary's at Gonzaga. KenPom lining this one, Zags -5, rematch of the first meeting where St. Mary's held serve on their home court, covering as home underdogs. And Gonzaga really, really struggled down the stretch, up 4 with just under 10 to go, but failed to shoot well from 3 by any stretch of the imagination. Under 18%, 17.3 to be exact, from behind the arc. No play for me because I would expect the market to be pretty efficient with the KenPom line here, or maybe just a tick under it. But I don't blame you if you want to look towards the Zags.
I do. They are still a top 5 team in shot quality, and we're a little bit lower on St. Mary's. It's not really much more than a data play. This is about that time. Mark Few, knock, knock. You there? You see your shadow maybe? Extra couple of weeks of winter. I don't know what's going on in Spokane. Maybe a little too cold right now. It has been a cold winter. But I do expect the dogs to wake up and start barking. And this is a spot where they kind of got to. And I don't like the need to win, must win, or else type thing. You have you need to win your whole season. That should be, if you need to be losing to start winning, I think you long lost. But this is definitely a big game. And that's definitely one thing that holds true, is that you don't want to lose both games in the season to your season rival. The only one that's really competed. And Gonzaga is going to get the bid, and no matter what, and St. Mary's probably too. But lifting the banner and having the proper seed, all of that, it matters here. All this stuff matters. So, and not losing on your home floor. So I do expect Gonzaga to get a healthy spread. I expect them to cover it. You want to talk about like a punt game? Sure, they might try. First half, I think, will probably be tight, but second half, Gonzaga is going to run away. They're just going to put everything they have into it, and they're going to get the win. And it's going to get a little ugly because, St. Mary's might end up fouling, and they'll get pushed past the 2 to 3 possession line, and they'll cover. So I'll be on Gonzaga. And the other side of that is they just absolutely dominate whistle to whistle, and they win by 15. And it's sort of just like a game where St. Mary's just puts their tail between their legs, shrugs their shoulders, and goes, all right, we split. And they go home, and they just kind of keep it respectable. So we'll see. I think all those potentials to me point towards Gonzaga having value.
Yeah, all but looking at St. Mary's recent stretch here, all but one, I was about to say 3, but all but one of their last 4 games, they've shot above 37.5% from deep. We saw Gonzaga throw some zone looks against St. Mary's in that first matchup, which really, really caused the Gales to struggle in the half court, not allowing them to get their ball screen action going. So I would expect more of that. And I'm with you. If I had to take a side in this one, it would be laying it with Gonzaga, maybe even first half if you can get a cheaper line. I don't hate Gonzaga minus 2.5 first half. Like you said, obviously there's the scenario
I think second half.
Yeah, or you can wait on that one, conversely. And if you get a tight game at the break, you take the Zags second half, and maybe you get a cheaper line of -2 full games, something like that. But really great conversation here, Justin, breaking down the one game Friday between Michigan State, and a loaded Saturday college basketball card. Any last words before we get out of here?
Nope, none for me. Enjoy the weekend. Got a big couple weeks coming up. I mean, this is, you got to tread a little carefully, try to handicap those motivations, and definitely want to maybe stick to teams that are still fighting and still in it. It gets a little wonky every year in this next week. So that's my only warning. Otherwise, enjoy. Come watch Shot Quality Live Betcast Saturday afternoon, 2:45. My co-host is on a 28-8 run, which is absolutely ridiculous. So,
yeah, the tools at Shot Quality are great. We've touched on them throughout this show. For Justin and for myself, Eli Hershkovich, be sure to check out thelines.com for the best college basketball odds, March Madness odds, and the like, sportsbook promos. Also, check out our bets in real time. Discord channel, link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. It's free, and be sure, if you want to win money, not spend, or bet anything, play.thelines.com for free college basketball contests. So thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Beat the Closing Number. So long, everybody, and good luck with your weekend college basketball bets.